Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know if you can see me, but we're just gonna go with it. So, um, I think so. What we're gonna talk about right now are the two articles. So the modern models in historical fiction, and then was the Pope old? So I was just gonna start off with the first one. So modern models in historical fiction, and the first question is: do you think it's okay to have modern models, particularly in women's roles, in historical fiction or not? Why or why not?
I could go first. Um,
Sorry.
like no one said anything. Um, okay, because in the example she used, it's a lot of like I'm pretty sure it was this article, but like the 14-year-old girl on the
Mm-hmm.
ship, and then like they ended up like letting her back on like to spend the rest of her life on there, and just all the examples that she used in the article. Um, I don't think it's okay because it's not like what's it called representing like that era or whatever accurately, and she stated that a lot of the times like the woman who went to go live with this man and his kids to end up like marrying him, and if like she were to come back her reputation would have been hurt. Like I don't know, I just think that she's right in the sense that it should have been more accurately represented.
I agree. Um, I think that they're pushing for women to seem more like women are nowadays. And so not representing an accurate picture, we don't really get to see what life was like back then.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get to see how difficult it was for women, really, and how many things women were not allowed to do or behave, and the rights that they didn't have, if we don't remember that that's the way it was, um, then I think that we may be in danger of going back. And that's why it's important to learn from history. I mean, I doubt that it would go back, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That it's important
Yeah.
that we get a clear picture of what it really was like living life back then, everyday life,
Mm-hmm.
not just the life of famous people.
And I think they just wanted to represent like these women and girls as like independent and strong. But the thing
Hmm.
was, is if back then that didn't happen, then why are they showing that? Like they want girls
Right.
now to feel like, oh, back then they were independent or whatever, so I can be too. But if you want to like display that message, pick a girl that actually did that, or like a young woman who did something like like a true story, not like change it.
Right.
Like
I get it. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. I agree. I agree.
Um,
And Danielle, we can see you now.
okay, good.
Oh, yes.
Um, but also, just to add on to that, um, I feel like I'm trying to answer a different question, but I feel like it fits. I understand historical fiction is to help people like understand what happened in history, to like learn from now and to like just understand what happened in the past. But I feel like sometimes people take fiction too far to the point where they're not telling the true history of what happened. So like that's where
Yeah.
everything starts to get blurred and like people aren't learning from the mistakes that have happened before and stuff. So um, I feel like that ties into it too, sort of.
It does. It does. And in that respect, I agree with you because it's kind of hard. I think the stories that have been passed down are different people's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, just like, let's see, there was uh, the German, the German historian said that writing history was saying what really happened, but according to who?
Right.
So the winners of a war and who they think are the losers, their stories are going to contradict.
Definitely.
And then also Johnny Tremaine by Esther Forbes, the famous novel of the American Revolution. One generation later, it was rewritten, and the story was written by different perspectives. People looking at it many years later through new eyes in a way.
Mhm.
So that's kind of difficult too.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to share for that question?
Well, I agree. I think it's important just to keep it as historically accurate as possible,
Mhm.
kind of like with what you said too. And, I mean, if there's things that you'd have to sugarcoat, then I think you shouldn't write that children's story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Okay.
I kind of disagree a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
go for it. It's okay. It's a discussion.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
No, go for it.
fiction.
Oh, please.
If I wanted to read, like, I don't know, when they were talking about, like, the girl, I can't remember which story it was, but where the girl,
Catherine, I think.
Catherine, where she was supposed to marry this old ugly man, and then
Hmm.
he dies right before, and so she gets to marry the handsome younger son. That's the kind of book girls want to read at that age, and they don't want to read about somebody their age marrying an
History.
old ugly man and being forced to read that. So it's fiction,
Yeah.
as long as they're aware that it's really fiction.
And I think that's the bottom line, that you keep in mind that some of the things are probably going to be true, but some of them are not.
Right.
Mhm. Okay. I agree with that too. I'm like on both sides. I don't really know. Okay, and then so the second question, I think, which ties into what we were saying right now, is do you think historical fiction should focus more on the everyday experience or the experience of more unusual people? Why or why not? I think
That's a good question.
I feel like it's good to have both because it's important to see how everyday life was, to see, like, just to be able to figure out how people lived back then and to learn from what they did back then and not make like the same mistakes now, I guess, in a sense. But it's also good to have stories about the unusual people, the ones who have like made an impact on the world or have made those really big mistakes before, mostly just to learn from them, but to also just to know like what happened. I feel like I'm not explaining this correctly, and I don't really know how to
No,
say
you
it.
you are. You're
Yeah.
explaining it just perfectly, I think. I think, because you're right. We do need a balance. We can't just focus on one and not the other.
Mhm.
And it does give you a better picture of what life was really like.
Yeah.
So, no, you said it very well.
Thank you.
I feel like the unusual people also make it like the story more interesting and like more fun for readers to read also.
That's true.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it just depends all on.
No.
I mean, it sounds bad. It all varies about like what's being studied.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
I think
That
we
makes
need to
sense.
have fun books to read and know
Yes.
that they're not true, but we still have to have them so that we can enjoy reading. Yeah, just factual information
Yeah,
can get
exactly.
pretty boring.
I agree wholeheartedly on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to share for that question or no?
Nope.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next article, which was the Pope old? And so the first question for that article would be, do you agree that fiction can and should outweigh historical when it comes to historical fiction? Which I feel like we already answered this, but we can discuss this still.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually like the articles. I liked when she was saying how she had to do all that research just to verify when Thanksgiving was held that year in Canada. Like, she spent all this time writing a great story, but then she had to do so much research just on those little nitpicky things.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is not what we pick up those kind of books for. Like, who cares if it's on a Thursday, not a Wednesday, or vice versa? So I don't know. That's a tough one. The way it's worded about the historical fiction or fictional history, or I don't know what it was, but that was a really good article, I think. Did I lose everybody?
No.
We're listening.
I was nodding. I was agreeing.
Yeah, now that we lost.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's your dog.
But I guess, yeah, it's just, if they're gonna be writing for that genre, they should be like going into depth about those little things. And I know like when I read it too, it's not like I'm like, oh, it was on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, because I wouldn't know stuff like that. But it would just be nice that to know that it is facts since you are reading like historical fiction. So I appreciate the effort she went through to like look for the actual date.
Yeah. I think like the most important facts of the story should be accurate and verified, but the more like tedious, like she was talking about the apron example, like the pocket was in the wrong place or something like that on the apron, like that kind of stuff. I feel like that's just like it's taken away from her time to write a great story if she has to do that much research about little things like that.
I agree about the tedious stuff. How important is it to find out whether it fell on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? But then I wrote down, subjective accuracy. What's important? Is it really important that we know that they had a pocket on the apron or not? Or that there were buttons on the apron? Does that become something that's indicative of the era? And how important is it? So I think that some things that are very tedious are not that important if you have to research it that deep, especially with calendars changing. Just like she said, and like in Canada when they celebrated Thanksgiving, that's a lot of research just to be accurate on a date.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that brings us into a great transition to our next question, which is, should accuracy in historical fiction be more important than storytelling?
Yeah, I think we actually answered that.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I just wanted to say the question just in case. All right, so we're going to move on to the last one, which is, at what point does a text become a piece of nonfiction rather than historical fiction? I'll go first.
I think just a lot of historical aspects that I think when there's not a lot of fiction, like a lot of like storytelling, like I think when it's just like historical facts just dominant over other stuff, I think that's when it's more of a historical text, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say when it's to the point where it's like boring and not fun anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. That was pretty much what I was gonna say too.
Mhm.
Cause cause I feel like there are some texts out there that are nonfiction that are actually interesting, but I know that it can be very like tedious and time consuming to read like every single bit about that person's life that like actually happened, because not all of it is appealing, because there's like they always go through like the good and the bad things that happen in their life, but half the time it's stuff that you don't really want to learn about, but it is important. So I agree.
I want to elaborate on that as far as historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
What about the process of something being discovered? I think some books that show the process of, oh my gosh, sorry, this sounds dumb, something scientific being discovered, I think that is not all boring. Um, like children's books on how and showing the steps and how something was discovered and how it's relevant to children. Gravity, electricity. I can't think of anything right now, but there are some children's books that aren't that boring to read, and not just by, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, I can I agree with that point too. I can see both sides. Is there anything else anyone wants to say? Because that was our last question. So, yeah.
I'm good.
No. All right.
Good.
Ah.
Clear.
Okay. So that was our last WebEx. Woo.
Yay.
All right. Let me stop this really quick.